Good morning. All right, welcome to the podcast, guys. This is episode 159. I have an amazing guest with me. We had a great catch up a while back, and this has been a long time coming. She has written a bunch of books, loves Jesus. Obviously, she's going to tell you more about herself, and I'm very, very excited for this conversation. So, Jessica, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Super happy to be here. This is gonna be fun.
Boom. So, before we maybe you can tell people a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, what you're up to.
Uh, that's such a big question. Who am I? I like to say that I'm a nobody from nowhere. Like I was construction worker's daughter, just raised in a religious setting. And then as a teenager, I met God as I can have a personal relationship with him for the first time at a winter camp. And so ever since that point, I've been on this radical journey of falling in love with Jesus more and more and getting healed and whole. I was been through a lot of trauma in my life, and so being able to be free and a healthy and whole person after that has been
Yeah.
an amazing process to see Jesus be big enough again and again. And so my passion, what makes me come alive, is to help empower people, like crush it on the earth, essence of God. I want to help people grow in sonship. I want to help people be free from torment because I was so tormented. Currently, I'm a stay-at-home mom homeschooling kiddos in the middle of South Carolina. So I'm in this kind of hidden season, but I have written 4 books. As Joseph was saying, that the Lord just put it on my heart, and then they supernaturally came to pass really quickly, and I got connected with Chris Blackaby for publishing them. And so it's just been this wild journey of growing in sonship and learning how to rest and learning how to crush it, and then trying to empower and help people along the way. So
That's so good, man. You wrote these 4 books, and we could just kick off right here. Like the way I found you was pretty crazy, right? I had a friend staying over. He mentioned your name, that he read some books on sonship and how you broke down some practicalities around sonship, and they helped him. And when he was saying that, I was like, oh, I wonder if Seraph Publishing, Chris published you. And so I messaged him straight away. And when I messaged him, he's tripping out because he was just about to meet you.
yep.
And it was just such a crazy God ordained moment that even for me, it was like, wow, like when God wants you to meet someone or know someone, and if he wants your books to be somewhere, it will happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a crazy encounter.
Yeah. And so here we are. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by hidden? What do you mean by hidden? Like, does God hide everybody? Is hiddenness a part of the journey? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we definitely see a pattern of hiddenness from the Old Testament to the New Testament for sure. So Moses, he was away in the desert for decades. Joseph was hidden in prison. Jesus was hidden for 30 years. Paul went away for an unknown 7-ish years to
Mm,
the desert. Like there's old to new, a definite pattern of people being hidden, being refined in the Lord, growing in maturity. I think it's important for sustainability. Not that you have to be hidden, but there's a maturing process so that you can do things sustainably. And so it is really important to honor and yield to that hidden time. And
mm,
then when it's time, then the hiddenness will be shifted, and hopefully you'll keep your heart close to the Lord so that you can sustainably walk in what He has for you.
mm. Do you find that when you are hidden, obviously all these things start getting exposed or revealed in your heart,
Absolutely.
And being saved in revival culture, like for me, 2008, I get thrust into this reality of the spirit, and it's all on. And there's a lot of performing that goes with that,
Yes.
A lot of we're praying for signs, miracles, wonders. We're seeing it, but there's
hmm
still this underlying. Are you seeing it, and are you seeing me? I
Yeah.
saw a lot of that in the beginning, even in myself, and so I almost wonder if there's a difference in the first hidden process to the second or third, or like let's say you're hidden and then you're seen. It's like you're revealed, but then you're concealed or hidden again. And do
hmm
you think there's seasons like that? What are your thoughts on that?
That has been my life. So it's been in and out of being hidden in the Lord, and then going into ministry, being seen a little bit, and then going back to being hidden. And it's been an interesting back and forth process. And every time that the Lord invites me back into a hidden season. It's actually back into fire, which I don't realize, but it's a purifying process. And so every time that my husband and I going back into a hidden season, it's faced with great trial and intensity and refinement. And then on the other side, it's like, wow, we've grown a ton, not even realizing it, because you're in that day in and day out fire, not realizing all the refinement that's happening. And then the next unhidden season comes and you're like, oh wow, like I can sustainably walk in so much more than I used to be able to. So that back and forth, hidden and unhidden, absolutely has been our story again and again and again.
Wow. That's so Chris Blackaby obviously would also say the same thing, in and out, in and out. And I've noticed a similar pattern for me, but it seems to always be an invitation to be hidden, right? It's always like, hey, I'm inviting you to something deeper. Yeah. Have you had a time where you didn't want to either be hidden or you didn't want to come back out? You know what I mean?
Well, Jesus has my yes, my absolute yes. So whatever he's asking, like this last hidden season was very painful for my husband and I. We were deeply established at the church that I was just talking about in California, that we were the kids pastors, and we had been there for 5 years, and we had finally gotten the wheels of the train moving. We had finally gotten this momentum, and the kids, they were just tapping into Jesus in deeper and deeper levels, and they were able to stay engaged in worship longer, and we were seeing more miracles happen. And there was just this, like, we had been trudging for so long, and finally there's this momentum. And I had been born and raised at that church, so the deep connection that we had, there's just so many generals there in the faith. And so we deeply loved the kids. We deeply loved this church family. And so they had our blood, sweat, and tears invested into this. And then when the Lord asked, it wasn't a command, it was this invitation of, will you come away and seek me? And I knew that the coming away, it was requiring us to move away, because it was completely cutting off ministry, completely focusing on him, being still, and all of this. And so it wasn't a command, and the Lord made it very clear. And so that was very painful, because it's like, we genuinely wholeheartedly love what we're doing. And also in like the ministry side, it's like we were growing in influence. Like it was snowballing more and more what the Lord was doing through my husband and I throughout the state of California. And started doing inner healing conferences. Like it wasn't just the children. There were so many things that God was doing that was like, it's the ministry is growing and things are growing, and there's so much fruit happening. Like I don't care about numbers. I want fruit. And there was so much good fruit happening. And so when the Lord invited us, it was like, you can choose to stay. And so that painful, like we could choose to stay, and we love these people, but we know that there's something more that the Lord has for us. And so we wrestled with it for a while. And I just, like, the bottom line was Jesus has our yes. So if he's inviting us, if he's asking us to come away and seek him, then he has our yes. And so as painful as it is to say goodbye to everybody that we love and we moved across the country to a place that we'd never been before. And so to move and to go to a new land, we said yes, and we came. And then crazy enough, because I have 2 daughters. And so my parents are like, you have the only grandbabies, we're coming. And at that point, my mom was already caring for her parents. So 4 generations followed us across the country. And so it was quite a big move for everybody. So we started our lives over here, and it was really hard because we all lived together. And so 9 people under one roof, 4 generations, lots of opinions, lots of very strong-headed people. And that has been a lot of the refinement since moving here. But shortly after coming, that's when God asked me to start writing the books, and then seeing like I couldn't have written the books doing what I was doing in California, and I would not be who I am today if I had stayed. Like we still would be seeing God move, and it still would be powerful, and it still would have been beautiful, but there's been so much refinement and so much beauty that has come. Like I see what the Lord was doing in it. So I would say this most recent one was the most painful one to come into the hidden season.
Yeah. Well, God seems to be so good at training us for what we need to be trained for, whether we realize it or not. So what was the invite? this is a good question because a lot of people maybe don't even recognize invitations. What did that invite sound like to you when he's calling you out of this church where, yeah, you can stay here, but I have an invitation? What did that sound like? What did that look like?
So something that I do a lot, and I talk a lot about it in the books, is teaching people how to go on encounters. So it's being still and then learning how to engage the Lord. And that's through, you can see, you can hear, you could feel, one or all, more senses than that as well, being engaged with it. But I just, in my stillness with the Lord, um, it's so funny because it took me years to recognize what the vision was, but I saw a desert, and then I saw a desert flower like deep in the desert. And I just kept hearing "Come Away." And I had like this prophetic song that just kept coming, of like the Lord drawing me away into the desert. And so that song just kept singing over and over in my heart. And it was the Lord beckoning me to come. And so I didn't even like dawn on me. Like, I'm thinking, come away. Yay, it's going to be sabbatical and restful and beautiful. And while the desert can be beautiful, like it was a desert picture. And so it was just that picture, and it kind of manifested later into that song, and it just kept pulling at my heart.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think would have happened if you didn't go? Hard
I
to say.
think it's hard to say. I think that well, for one thing, I did have a pretty severe postpartum crash, about 6 months, 3 months after we moved, 6 months after our last day of working at the church. So there was such a drive, a go, go, go. Like, I'm a go getter, work hard type personality. And my husband and I, we got hired when I was 7 months pregnant with our first, and then we miscarried between our two daughters. And then our second baby was very, very difficult. She was a very difficult infant. And so, but COVID happened shortly after. And so there was just this really hard push, because we didn't shut down with COVID, and we amped up and got even more busy and stuff. And so that the strain on my body, my body didn't stop. My body just kept performing and kept holding the line. And so as soon as we came here and I was able to let down a little bit, like I crashed pretty hard. And so the quantum easement of like pushing out that crash, I don't know how much more I would have lasted before that crash, but that crash was pretty messy and pretty hard on my body. It took a long time to heal, but then I healed and recovered and stuff. So I think God would have still been doing miracles, and it still would have been good. They're a good family. So even in the midst of me collapsing, there still would have been such goodness in it, but there wouldn't be the books, there wouldn't be the connections, there wouldn't be the maturing and learning how to tap into rest, because I was so go, like fighting to do stuff for the Lord, learning how to rest and how to operate from rest, which is something that it's a big deal to me because I want it to be sustainable. And what I was doing was not sustainable. And so it would have caught up with me. Could I have learned and eventually, theoretically, yes, but most likely I would have had to step back and stop at some point, because it wasn't, how hard I was pushing was not sustainable.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I remember in 2018, around that time, just the Lord talking to me about rest and how rest is the most powerful energy source that has ever existed. The Lord of the Sabbath is producing so much that you can't write enough about it. There's not enough books to contain it. So I'm like, all right, rest, the most powerful energy source. Let's go. But I'm still operating from my own gas tank. And I came close to burnout in my own way because I was just pushing on all cylinders, and we went through church drama, and we have 3 children, and I'm building this business and doing podcasts. And what do you think about this, where God invites someone into something that actually they are totally not walking in at the moment, but by inviting them into the subject, he invites them into that reality? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. He knows his timing is perfect. So if he's inviting you into something, then even if you're a baby in it, like, he's bringing you in it so that he can disciple and mature you in that area, because it's something for your part of your inheritance, part of your destiny, however you want to look at it, whether you're receiving or called to walk in it. But everything's going to be new to us at some point. So,
Mm.
whether it's dead raising or, a new type of ministry or a new type of facet of sonship, like everything that he's going to reveal to us is going to be new at the beginning.
Yeah. So when did you meet the Lord? When did you get saved? You talked about getting raised in a conservative home.
Yes, a Christian religious home.
Okay.
So it's kind of I've always known the Lord, and so that's a hard answer for me because
Sure.
I don't remember ever getting saved because I don't remember a time without Him, and
I
so
get you.
we were raised in this Pentecostal, charismatic, religious upbringing, and so that was like there was just always this love for the Lord, but He was
Mm.
a very far away, distant master. When I die, I get to meet Him, and I can pray, and hopefully, I've been good enough that He'll listen to my prayers that day, type relationship.
Yes.
And then when I was 16 is when I went away to a winter camp that Joaquin Evans was doing. He's the guy that started the Healing Wells at Bethel.
Yeah.
And at that winter camp is when I met God intimately for the first time. So I'd always loved God and I'd always believed in Him, but that's when everything blew open for having a personal, intimate relationship, walking with the Lord. And then I would say, I don't know, 7 years later, I found out about Chris Blackaby and just went into the sonship step from there.
Okay. What did you
Yeah.
What did you notice as a big change from the beginning, so 16, to when you started to look into sonship?
Well, that season was a very, very intense season of going after inner healing. So because I was so tormented, even as a 16-year-old, because I would see in the spirit, and so I'd see demons and they'd come at night and torment me. And so I would literally cry as the sun started to set because it's like, okay, now my torment's coming all night long.
Wow.
And so I had night terrors when I did sleep, and when I was awake, I was seeing demons in my room. So it was just, I hated the night. It was a terrible time for me. And so when I had that winter camp experience and I learned that I could talk to the Lord and He started inner healing at that camp, then I just was like, I feel amazing. Like how far can I run with this inner healing thing? Like how whole
Mm.
can I actually get? And so that season was just a very aggressive season of me going after the victim mentality and shame and fear and rejection and unforgiveness and bitterness and any other thing that held me back from Jesus, because I just
Mm.
decided like I hate Satan. Like he's
Mm.
the enemy. I don't want to partner with him in any facet in my life.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
um because I'm an all-in aggressive type personality, it was like all of my attention went to how free can I get, how whole can I get from the torment that I've been in. And then I started feeling so good and I was like, wow, I want to help other people feel this, because this is what God designed for us to feel like. He designed for us to be full of love and full of joy and full of peace. And I want
Mm.
this. Like, where is this in the church? This is lacking in the
Mm.
church. And the church even is what told me like I would always be broken, I'd always be messed up, because when you go through sexual abuse, you can never be healed. Like, in
Yeah.
essence, it's saying that Jesus isn't big enough, which just
Mm.
makes me so upset. But that's what they're saying. Like, if you've gone through abuse and you're always going to have, issues in your marriage, and you're always going to have the dreams, the insecurities, and that's just your lot in life, then that's a very small view of Jesus. And so when I started
Sure.
seeing that Jesus was big enough to make me whole, I was like, psh, no, like we need to let people know that He's way bigger than what you had previously been told.
Yeah. So how did these night terrors stop? And the fact that you were seeing in the spirit during the day, how did that, like, what happened? Did that change? Did that stop? Were you starting to see angels? What happened there?
So the night terrors slowly stopped as the inner healing process happened. So I would have night terrors around 5 nights out of the week.
Wow.
And so it was constant. And so then they just kind of tapered down to 4 and then 3 and then 2 and then 1 and then once a month, and they slowly went away as my soul became whole and my soul healed.
Well,
Um
can we go into that a little bit? Like, let's go into that a little
yeah.
bit. What do you mean by your soul became whole? So what was giving room to these night terrors, right? Like normal Pentecostal Christianity would just say, you bind the thing and kick it out, and
Yeah.
it should not have any room. It should not be able to come into your room in the first place, Jessica, So
Yeah.
can you touch on that a little bit?
What your soul is in agreement with is going to give the open door for the enemy to attack you. And that's why I'm so passionate about like going after inner healing and soul health. So if I'm in partnership with fear, if I'm agreeing with lies of shame, agreeing with lies of rejection, agreeing with the lies of the victim spirit, then that agreement is allowing that demon, allowing that entity to have a measure of authority over me, because I am giving my authority to it. I am empowering it in my life. So absolutely, like the blood of Jesus finishes it. They have nothing on Jesus, so they shouldn't have anything on me, and until I empower them by believing their lies. And so we're literally believing either truth or we're believing lies and empowering the demonic in our lives. And so it was a slow process of realizing, okay, here's a lie here, here's a lie here, here's a lie here, here's a lie here, and slowly going after that. And then it snowballs. So like the beginning, it's very tedious and you're going through these different lies, but as your soul grows capacity to trust Jesus, then you can just start lump summing, like, hey, we're going to lump sum this and give it to him, and lump sum this and give it to him, and it gets faster and faster and faster.
Wow. So what you're saying is that I have so much power and authority in what I choose to agree with, and I can agree with the word, I can agree with the truth, or I can agree with lies. What are these lies? Like, so is this a product of my upbringing, things that I've been through? Like, let's say I've been through abuse, or I've been through some hard things in life, and now there are things I believe, right, about myself. So what we're saying, and I would agree with you, is that it's not that that thing has power over me. I am giving that thing power.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So how does one start to recognize that there are these lies and start to catch them? What are your thoughts on that?
Everything comes back to being to entangling with Jesus. So the encounters that is basically learning how to walk day in and day out, moment to moment, entangled with Jesus constantly. So we have a body, a soul, and a spirit. And so our spirit, biblically, we know that our spirit becomes one spirit with Jesus the moment we believe in him. So the spirit is seated in heavenly places. It's finished. It's done. It's a new creation. The old has gone. The new has come. All of that is finished. All of the verses in the New Testament that talk about you need to renew your mind to transform your life. You need to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Those concepts are talking about your soul. So you got the body, soul, spirit. It's talking about the soul. And what's amazing about this setup is with this, Jesus was still able to preserve our free will. So I know I'm kind of taking a long time to answer your question, but Jesus had to be able to take away the power of the enemy and empower us without removing our free will. And he did that within our three-part being. So the spirit is empowered. The spirit is one spirit with Jesus. So everything that he has, I have. As he is, so am I here on this earth. Like it is done and finished. Boom. But the free will is in the soul. So the free will can either decide to agree with what's already done in the spirit and agree with the oneness that we have, or the free will can decide to agree with and empower any lies. So you're asking about like, where do the lies come from? It comes from your cultural upbringing. It comes from mom. It comes from dad. It comes from the church. It comes from school. The first 5 years are extremely foundational for childhood education and stuff. So trauma is another big one because we naturally decide and make declarations about life based on our experiences and our circumstances, good or bad, for how God is and how this life operates, unless we're intentionally going through and correcting those things of like, no, this isn't actually how God is. No, this isn't actually how life works, and stuff. So it's through that entanglement, like with Jesus, that I go and I ask him, Jesus, what lie am I believing? Is there anything that I'm partnering with fear with today? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have fear of man that you're dealing with in this area. Oh, you have fear of money right here in this area. And so it's everything. Instead of me trying to go and figure out what needs to get worked on in my soul, what lies could I possibly be believing? Like I'm pea-brained. That's one of my core things. Like we know in part, we see in part. Paul said that we see through a glass dimly. And so I'm going to go to the one who's not pea-brained and ask him. And he knows the perfect timing for what my soul needs for, okay, today my soul has the capacity to deal with this. And so going and asking him, like, are there any lies that I'm believing about you? Are there any lies that I'm believing about me? Like, is there anything you want to tell me today? What should I be focusing on and meditating on today, Lord? And through that intimacy of walking with him moment to moment, then he's teaching me like, oh, this is actually a lie over here, and completely blowing my mind because I didn't know that that was a lie.
Mm. So someone will be listening to you right now, and you've written books, and you're sitting here, and you're confident, and you're smiling, and you can see the joy on your face, but you're like, "Oh, I went through sexual abuse. You went through stuff as a child." Can you
Yeah.
touch on that a little bit? That journey, like, of going through that, and being in a Christian home. How did you make sense of that? How did you walk through that?
I don't know how to. For some reason, I wasn't mad at God. For some reason, I didn't harden my heart against him. I don't know why I didn't. But it was a family friend, and I was in the 5 to 7 somewhere age range. And it happened for a few years until the family friend moved away. And so that in the trauma, that's what started my starting to see in the spiritual realm, because trauma a lot of times will open your gift of sight or your ability to see. And so from that 5 to 7 age on, I started seeing demons, and I didn't see any angels until I was like 16 at that camp. That was the first time
Wow.
that I saw an angel. So biblically, I knew like, well, the math that I did as a kid was that 1/3 of the angels fell. So it's like there's twice as many angels as there are demons. I'm only seeing demons, but in faith, I'm staking that there's twice as many angels as there are bad guys. But all I'm seeing is bad guys all the time.
Mm.
So
And
I,
this bad guy thing began after the trauma. The trauma unlocked
mhm,
your ability to see this.
yes.
What do
And
you
Chris,
think about that? Why? Because a lot of people talk about that.
I don't know what it is about trauma. Like I don't have a scientific explanation, but I know that trauma opens that spiritual awareness. And even like the occult uses that. They intentionally use a trauma to activate the spiritual gifts in people. And so I don't I don't know why or how it happens, but it is again and again and again something that we see. And so um
Yeah. And
yeah,
that's something that I think that the enemy really uses on purpose, right? I heard
yeah.
a witch doctor talk about how when he was going to the next level of his powers, he was subjected to a lot of sexual abuse to be ready. It was like it fragmented his soul
Yep.
to be ready for this next level of being used by the enemy. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating. So this happens, you start seeing all this darkness. And at that time, what's your thinking in terms of God? Like, are you praying to God, like, God, get this away? Or are you like, God sending this to me? What are your thoughts at that time?
It was kind of a weird thing because of being raised in an exorcist church setting. Like the demonic was a common talking about thing. And so with the kids, it was like, nope, we're not afraid of demons. You tell the demons to leave in Jesus' name and read your Bible. And this is like very uh what do you call it? I don't 60-fold. Like you do this, you do this, you do this to get rid of the demons. And so I just poured into the Bible. It was King James at that point. And so my parents, they got me I think it may have been a New King James that they got me when I was 7 years old. And so I just read through and was like, okay,
Wow.
Jesus said this and Jesus said this, so I'm going to try that. And it was really interesting because the Lord used it as a training ground. So in the midst of my torment, at the same time, I wasn't just being tormented, like I was growing. And so the Holy Spirit would teach me, like, do this and do this for this demon. And then that level of demon, I want to say, would leave. So it started off with 2-dimensional shadows when I was very, very
Mm,
young. And then they became 3-dimensional shadows. And then they started off as like little coyotes. And then they went up to wolves. And then they were mountain lion size.
wow.
And then they were like, then after that, they were all sorts of funky, weird, gargoyle, monstrous looking things. But
You
the
would see
level,
these, you would see these with your eyes open, or would you
mhm.
sense them in the room or in your imagination? What's
Well, I'm not physically seeing them, but with my eyes open, I'm seeing in the spirit these things in the room. And
and you can
so,
feel something?
yeah, yeah, I can I can feel them, and I feel them and see them. And so, yeah. So that's in the Lord and his kindness and in his covering, like he didn't let something greater than my capacity come and torment me. So it was this weird,
Mm,
like I see his covering, I see his protection, and he's discipling me and teaching me how to deal with each level of demonic thing that I was wrestling with. And then that one would leave and I'd get a short day or two break, and then the next level would come. So it was constant and it was exhausting, but at the same time I saw the hand of the Lord in it, and he was walking with me so closely in it. So it was like he was my savior. He was the only one helping me. I couldn't be mad at him, and I saw him covering and protecting me, but I was very tired because I didn't know about how to rest, and I didn't know how to not be tormented. So
Wow.
yeah, I learned about fasting and bloodlines, anointing the windows, like just as the demonic attacks got bigger, then it was like new strategies. I was taught new strategies and how to deal with the different levels.
Wow. This is fascinating because when you're talking about shadows, 2D and then 3D and then actual, like a little lion or, oh, sorry, I don't remember what you use, but you just, coyote, I think. And they're
Yeah.
growing up, right, to become bigger things. It is fascinating. Like I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And
Mm-hmm.
my 4-year-old's description of something that she sees that might be a
Yep.
bit dark is, it could seem like nothing to someone, but it is so real for her, right? She's
Yes, it
waking
is.
up in a dream. And so that's really fascinating. I think that would really help a lot of people, because even as a child, for me, the darkness and some of the things that I saw that, people just say, oh, that's nothing, just don't worry
Right.
about it. But it really grips you with fear.
Yeah.
Somewhere in your soul, you're having to make sense of what you're experiencing and what
Mm-hmm.
an adult might say is not true.
Right. It's
That
that
yeah.
wrestle between the seen and the unseen. And so the adults and the people who have put the spiritual realm to sleep, they're like, oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. You're just making it up. It's, it's not real, but it actually is very real. And your spirit knows that it's real. Your soul knows that it's real, but it can't quantify it because there's not physically there. And so trying to know what to do with that wrestle, um, it's a hard thing, especially for a child, to try and, like, when the parents aren't believing in them and they're like, no, it's not real, just go back to bed and stuff. Like, you can tell is it your daughter? You said daughter for the
Yeah.
4-year-old that's
Yeah.
saying?
Yep.
So you can invite Jesus into that space and have her close her
Mm.
eyes and say, Jesus, like, how do we get rid of this thing? What do I need to do to tell this thing to leave? And then you'll watch that shift happen where Jesus will say this, or he just comes in and handles it, or he'll say, take the sword out and whack it or whatever. Like my girls, they'll have bad dreams, or they'll see things in the spirit. And they come in and they're scared, and it's like, okay, go ask Jesus, what do we do? And then they do it, and just the immediate shift. Like, you can't force a child to just have an entire demeanor shift from being afraid or terrorized because of a bad dream to all of a sudden they're at peace and they're falling back asleep and they're not afraid to walk back into their room and look in their closet. It's because we're actually wrestling with things. And then when you teach them how to bring it to Jesus and then get it dealt with, then you get to see them be filled with peace and joy again.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we roll in our home, a little bit like that. And with the kids especially. What's interesting is I had this one night where my daughter was kind of whimpering in her dream, in her sleep, and she wasn't awake. So I started praying, and the Lord very clearly said to me, stop it, pray that she has boldness and courage because I'm training her. I thought that was a fascinating moment. As a dad, I'm like, what's going on? We need to stop this.
Take away the pain.
And Father is like, I'm training her. Let me train her. So that is interesting, and I do think, if we had a culture where children were raised in this, where it was normal to know their authority, not just know that the spirit realm's real, but know who they are, who God is, it would be a very different looking world right now.
I 100% agree. The empowering kids to know who their God is and how big they are and to be captivated with Jesus all the time. So that's the thing that I think helped David so much with Goliath, because he spent all day being captivated, beholding the goodness and the bigness of God. And so when he saw the giant was small. The giant was dwarfed compared to the Lord. And so this is a no-brainer battle. Like, duh, you see how small he is. And so if we spend our time beholding the bigness of God, and I'll literally tell the girls, is like, okay, well, close your eyes. Jesus, how big are you compared to this dragon? Jesus, how big are you compared to this bear that I'm seeing right now? And the bear is like not even a speck of dust. And so it just takes this big, scary thing and dwarfs it down to nothing. Like, it takes all of the power and all of the authority away from it. And what you said earlier about the dream and being training, I think that's a really, really, really big key for people. Is God has done so much training for me in visions and in dreams, because most people have to see before they can start walking in it. They have to watch it happen. And so it's a way for us to see it happening without it actually happening physically in front of us. So she is being trained and equipped, kind of like the Matrix, where they like put you in the video game to train you. In the dreams, we're being trained, we're being equipped. And so I've seen visions and I've seen miracles happen that I haven't seen happen on the earth, but I've seen them in my mind's eye. So now I know that they're possible. I know that they're capable. And I've seen like dreams. I had a dream 2.5 years ago of a tornado happening here in South Carolina, which we moved to an area that doesn't have tornadoes very often at all. So I had the dream and I saw the tornado over our house and I stopped it. And I woke up and I was like, okay, well, we don't have tornadoes here, so I'll just put that dream on the shelf. And that next day, in the afternoon, all of my hair stands up on my arm and the sky goes black. And the Lord's like, it's time for you to go out and stop the tornado. And I was like, excuse me, what? Like, you want me to stop the tornado? We don't have tornadoes here. And as I went outside, I looked up on our porch and I saw the funnel cloud. The sky was black. Everything got silent and the funnel cloud started coming down over our house. And there was not any fear in me because it's like, oh, I already saw what I did in the dream. I threw my arms up and I said, there will be no destruction in Jesus' name. I commanded to go, and the tornado disappeared. So there wasn't like, I already had my marching orders. Like I'd already seen it in my mind. And so I knew what to do. And there was absolutely no fear. My kids came out with me and I said, that's a tornado. I had a dream about it last night. We're going to tell it there's going to be no destruction in Jesus' name. Tell it to go, and it's going to go. And so me and my 2 daughters, we stood there, we did that, and it exactly happened in the physical, in the natural, how I had seen it the night before. And so the training in dreams is a big deal. It's very, very helpful.
That is so good. You know, obviously there are people who would say, how can you do that? Who are you to talk to a tornado? And all that, you know, there's spectrum of beliefs and stuff. I remember seeing a video of Jeff Jansen. I don't know if you know that name. You probably do. Jeff Jansen. And he's speaking to a tornado that's coming at his house. And later on, he drove around the region and his building was fine, but there was destruction everywhere. I thought that was fascinating. So let's touch on this a little bit because people hear that, right? Some people say baloney, it's not true, can't be real. But then some would say, I can go anywhere, everywhere, speak to anything I want, do what I want. I command based on what I want. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not command based on what I want. It's not my will, but the Lord's will. And so under submission, yes, like under the whole thing of sonship is sons are yielded. They're submitted to the Father. That's the hierarchy of sonship. And so my will yielded to the Father's will. Yes, go and crush it on the earth. You know, heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons, preach the gospel to all of creation. Jesus said all. He didn't just say the humans. He said all of creation. And we know in Romans that creation is waiting with eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed on the earth, not for Jesus. Creation's not waiting for revival. Creation's not waiting for Jesus to come and come back and fix everything. Creation is waiting for the sons of God to be released on the earth. And so, under submission to the Lord, under that yielded, not my will, but your will, yes, then I think the Lord delights in us playing and like experimenting with our authority and our sonship. And we see that with Jesus, like turning water into wine. That's not a necessary miracle. It's not a have to miracle. Someone wasn't dying. Like, why turn water into wine for people who are already drunk? Why walk on water? You know, why teleport? There's all these things that he did that's just like, these are not necessary miracles. And so that shows us that there's an element of play, which I think is a very big part of being a child of God, is like retaining that childlike, not childishness, but childlikeness, and that exploration of what else could I do?
Yeah.
How far can we go with this?
So do you have a story of some kind of play thing with the Lord where something happened? Can you think of anything? I'm just putting you on the spot here. But
you are putting me on the spot. I'm trying to think. I mean, some things like I've practiced preaching the gospel to creation, breaking the curse of sin off of trees and our animals that we have. And I've done so many play things. I'm not pulling any of them right now.
Sure,
if I think of them, I'll share them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just throwing you there in the deep end right there. But So that's interesting, right? Because a lot of people don't even understand that concept that God is fun, right? God has
Yeah.
fun. God is joy. Like, I think a lot of us in our programming of religion, like I grew up in
Hmm.
an Anglican kind of church, and people would sing joyful songs with the saddest face. You know, like,
Yes.
you're not allowed to smile there. You know, the
Yep.
organ is going, and you better look holy and solemn. And so, my
Exactly.
first Pentecostal church experience, I was convinced people were on drugs or something because they were
Absolutely.
dancing, they looked high. It was crazy. So that is something I think we need to understand is God is fun. He likes to have fun, and so I like that. You know, you brought that up, and we're talking about this part, the play.
Yeah. Well, the garden, Eden is pleasure. And so he literally created this place of pure bliss and pleasure and delight in the Lord. And there's so many verses about joy and the joy of the Lord being our strength, and in his presence is joys forevermore. And the this whole other side of God has gotten lost in the institution of the church. And it is really
Mm,
important to understand, because it was the joy set before him that Jesus endured the cross. It
mm.
wasn't the love that endured the cross. It was the joy. And so there's something deeply profound and powerful about joy that I think is going to be restored to the earth again and tapped into with the sons of God, because it's such a huge facet and it's been lost through the centuries.
Yeah. Wow. So, what are your thoughts on surrender? We keep talking about surrender, and I only do what I see my father doing, right? He's like, apart from
Yeah.
my father, I can do nothing. But really, he could do a lot, right? But he's
Hmm.
saying he doesn't want to do anything, right?
Yes.
But some people would say you don't always have to ask the Lord what he's doing, you know, that tension. What do you think about
Yep.
that? We got people that are like, you got to ask God everything before you eat your next donut. And then there are people that are like, your thoughts are his thoughts are your thoughts. You're fine. And this tension in the middle. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the goal is entanglement. The goal is oneness with Jesus. And so when you become one, literally one, then there's not a separation between the two. And so my everything that I am, like the position of my heart is yielded. The position of my heart is surrendered to Jesus 100%. But he and I are also entangled in that. And so there's uh, you have co-reigning and co-laboring, and those two things, you got the cocoa gospel, there's a whole bunch of co's that we're co-heirs and stuff. I love how Justin Paul Abraham calls it the cocoa gospel.
Sure.
But in that, like, in that submission, because I'm entangled, like, and there's not even language in that entanglement, there's not English in these encounters, it's just this oneness and this knowing. And so if I'm not feeling the Lord say yes or no, you need to go left or right, then I feel like it's a place where I get to choose. So there's
Mm,
an element of sonship where, as a son or daughter, so just a child that's growing and maturing, I want that child to be able to make powerful choices on the earth. I don't want that child to be a robot. Like, God didn't make robots. So robots
mm.
only do yes, no, left, right. Like, they can only do what they're programmed. And so,
Religion.
yes, religion. And so as a parent, like, I want my child to be able to be creative, to make powerful choices, to make decisions and intelligent choices and powerful choices and strategies on the earth, and us to run with it and explore it together. And so yes, there's that submission. And then if there's not a go left or go right, then there's, okay, you get to decide, and I'm going to work together with you, and we're going to co-reign together and co-labor together in this expression on the earth. So like
Mm,
an example of that would be the move here. In that invitation to come away, I was like, okay, Lord, where do you want us to go? And he would not tell us where to go. Like, he would not give us, you are coming here. It was an
sure.
invitation. And so with that invitation, it was so much pressure for me being in, like, religion. Like,
Yeah.
we're all learning how to walk out of that institutionized
Yes.
ideas. And so for me, I was like, God, I don't want to mess up. Like, I don't want to pick the wrong place. And so I had the responsibility. It wasn't just me anymore. It was me, my husband, my children, and then my parents and my grandparents, and my brother
Mm,
followed. And so there's so many people that are banking their entire lives on this choice. Like, tell me what's the best choice. Like, I just want the best
Mm,
choice. And what the Lord
mm,
is really showing me is that when he's not telling you go left or go right, it doesn't matter what you choose, like in that, because you're submitted, as long as there's that submission, doesn't matter what you choose, because then he's going to weave his purposes and his prophetic words into that choice. And it was just, I don't even have words for how profound and impossible it was when we moved here, the things that God did, because it was my word that said, come away. And my parents decided to follow. They didn't have the word, they followed us.
mm.
But God wove prophetic words that my parents got 3 and 4 years before into the move. So I picked this house, I picked this
Wow.
property in South Carolina, sight unseen, never been to the state before. Like, this is where we're going to go. And then God wove prophetic words for my parents into that choice that I made. So it wasn't just our prophetic words, but he wove generationally into that choice that I made. Like, what he did was impossible.
Yeah.
And my grandpa, he just recently passed away in October. And the way that he passed away was tragic. He had cancer in his lungs and he had pneumonia, and so basically you choke to death when you're dying like that. And 15 minutes away from this house that we picked, I'm in this house right now, so I keep pointing here. 15 minutes away from this house is the best hospice care home, I believe, in the country. And I didn't even
Okay.
know it. I had no idea.
Wow.
We weren't looking for hospice places. We didn't look at the hospitals. We didn't look at, I mean, we looked at, there was a hospital close because my grandparents are elderly, but we didn't look for a specific care facility for my grandparents' needs. And
Sure.
when my grandpa, it's like the generationally things that God wove into in his kindness. When my grandpa passed away, they had the best care, the best nurses, and they were all believers. And so they're praying with my grandma and praying with my mom, and just the most incredible experience that we could have had, the kindness of Jesus. And it was 15 minutes away from this house. We live in a town of
Mm,
383 people. There's nobody
mm.
here. We are in the
Oh,
middle of nowhere in this town. And just down the road was this amazing facility that we could run back and forth to be with him as he passed away. And so
wow.
the generational care that the Lord took into this decision of this invitation to come away, I picked a house, and not only did he weave my husband's and my children's prophetic words and futures into this, but he did it generationally as well for my
Mm,
parents and my
mm.
grandparents caring. It's just impossible.
So good, man. I like to say that God is working 8 billion algorithms all at once,
Literally.
everyone's lives intricately putting it together.
Yeah.
That is so good. There's so many things you mentioned there, like death, for example. I don't think we understand how to walk through death and disappointment. It's really
Yeah.
weird. Like, you got people that would say death obviously is not God's original plan. And so, oh, death is bad. And then you got people that it's, you would never pray for someone to get raised from the dead. Yet Jesus raised the dead, and Matthew 10:8 tells us to raise the dead.
Yeah.
And you've had some experience in that, right? You've prayed have you seen someone raised from the dead?
I have not. I've only prayed for a fly, and that's all that's come back so far. I've prayed for a lot more than a fly, but a fly was the only thing. And I've
Sure.
had kids in my kids ministry. They brought a tadpole, a dragonfly. My daughter brought a fish back. So
Yeah.
we've we've been practicing on all of creation. We live on a farm, so
Yes.
we've prayed for the baby pigs and the baby lambs that have been born, and then I've had the opportunity to pray for lots of people, friends and family
Yeah.
that have passed away. I have not seen any people uh, come back, only the little creatures so far.
I think we are on the same page. I had an experience with, I think I had a fly experience too, and
Yes.
a bird. I had a bird experience, but it was not fully dead. But humans, I haven't seen one yet. What are your thoughts on this when you're praying and then walking through the loss, right? The sadness of loss and mourning, right? Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall
Yeah.
be comforted. What are your thoughts on that process?
Grieving is a huge thing that we have lost in the West. We don't know how to grieve, and we don't know how to process death. And so as a whole, we feel like it's a dishonor to let go and to heal from a death that has happened. And so we carry that loss and we carry that pain as a way to honor them. Because if I move on, if I heal, if I become whole, then I'm not honoring that life. And it shows that I didn't actually care. But that's a whole lie to keep us in bondage. And so grieving is the only thing that is a different animal than everything else. Like, as I talked about believing lies and stuff, which, yes, you can believe lies while you're grieving. You can absolutely pick up offenses at God and
Yeah,
pick up lies
totally.
at the same time. But just grieving in and of itself isn't a lie that you're believing. It's a loss that you've experienced. And so when I went through our miscarriage, that's when Jesus taught me how to grieve. So I had heard that the Jews, they know how to grieve, and they know how to grieve well. And so it's a 30 days. Like, this is when you grieve and you wail and you cry and you are fully present in the pain. And even culturally, like if you're in Israel and you are in the grocery store and you feel that a wave of grief, you are expected to give space to that, to stop what you're doing and wail and weep and collapse on the floor if you need to, like be fully
Wow.
present in it. And strangers, because this is the cultural expectation, they don't know you, they don't know why you're grieving, but they will come and they will kneel with you and they will weep with you and they will be with you and bear that burden with you. And it's just so beautiful. And I had
Wow.
heard that before miscarrying. And so I had glimpses of like, this is what grieving is, this, be fully present, embrace it, and such. And then with my, like the entanglement that Jesus just keeps like oneness, oneness, oneness. So when we lost our son, what it was, a really intense teaching for me was to go and bring my pain to the Lord. So most people, when you're in pain, you pull back, right? So like you touch the stove and you pull back. And so that's what our soul does in pain, is we pull back. So we pull away and we protect ourselves. And that's essentially what the soul does in grieving. And it's really important instead to bring that pain to Jesus. And so I would go and ugly cry and be honest and be vulnerable and tell Jesus, like, I don't know, like, why wasn't my faith enough to save my son? Like, I did everything, all of the Pentecostal things, the bloodlines and anointing and blessing and cursing and renouncing and, binding and loosing and everything, every trick in the book. Like, I did it all. And then you have that accusation of like, why didn't you show up? And why didn't you tell me how to save my son? And why didn't you give me a warning, a heads up? I could have stopped this. And all of this stuff. And God is big enough for your process. He's big enough for your grief. And so for me, it was that every moment that I felt it, which is exhausting because we are taught to avoid pain. We're taught to be pain avoidant in the West, and to stuff. Don't feel. And so every time I felt that wave of any emotion, going to the Lord in that entangled place and just saying, Lord, like, I don't understand and I'm hurting, but I'm going to lay it all down. I have an altar in heaven that I just like to go, and I will lay on the altar. I'll lay dreams, the future, the past, whatever baggage I'm carrying, like whatever it is. Like, I just go and I lay things on the altar. And so the accusation, the fear, the sadness, the grief, the pain, like the confusion, going and laying all of that on the altar. And then I would intentionally walk away from it. So I'm not letting that be my focus. And I'm just going to go and sit with Jesus. And so in that season, there was this like babbling brook that was next to my altar in heaven. So I would lay everything down and then I would go sit with Jesus. And I would just cry. And he would cry with me and just sit in silence when there was no more tears to cry, and just sit there and stare at the brook until it's like I healed slowly and little by little and little by little. And at the beginning, because you're in so much pain, it is when everything's fresh, you're constantly in that place of grieving. And so you're laying it down again 1,000 times. But as you're diligent to that and as you steward that, it's like, okay, now it's only 100 times a day. Okay, now it's only hourly. Okay, now it's only, a couple times a day. Okay, now it's only once a day. And it just tapered down to where for my journey, it was 30 days of healing from my miscarriage, which
Wow.
it's impossible. Like, women carry those babies, they carry the pain of the miscarriage with them forever. And it's like, I'll tell someone I had a miscarriage and then they're breaking down crying from a miscarriage that they had 20 years ago because they're
Yes.
still carrying that pain. And so for me to heal in 30 days, a lot of people were offended. It's like, oh, well, you didn't care, or, oh, you weren't really that far pregnant. Like, oh, well, that, whatever justification they can come up with for
Wow.
why you shouldn't be healed. And it's, trying to make sense of me being whole after. And it's not dishonoring to my son. Like, from heaven, they want us to be healed. They want us to be
Yes.
whole. And so for me to be whole and healed and being able to be a place of healing and health for other women as well, and other people that have gone through grief, not just for miscarriage, but in death, losing spouses, losing parents, like there's losing best friends. There's so much pain that we face in this world, and we don't have to carry that pain. Like Jesus, he says our burden is light. And so he carries the pain. He carries the weight. He is our healer. And then we could be healed and restored and moved on. And you were asking about death. It's like death, the spiritual realm, the body might not be alive anymore, but their point of existence has not changed.
Yeah.
Their aliveness has not changed. In fact, they're more alive when they fully are awake in heaven. And so
Sure.
that it takes the sting of death away as you're able to heal and see past that and stuff. I had a really interesting encounter. I had 3 friends that all died from cancer. So I had it was a close family friend, my dad's best friend, and then my cousin, who's just a few years older than me. They all died from cancer 2 weeks apart from each other. And so we'd been praying for them for years, and then they just all happened to die, just boom, 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 right next to each other. And during that time, I was teaching at a VBS that I was doing all summer long, a vacation Bible school with my kids. And I'm telling the kids, you can heal the sick, you can raise the dead, you can cast out demons. And then someone died. And then I'm coming in, you can heal the sick, you can raise the dead, you can cast out demons. And another one died. And it was just this like bashing up. I'm telling the kids this one thing, and at the same time, I'm hitting death, death, death for these people that I've been fighting for years and going to the hospital and praying for. And even having dreams of them being healed and dreams of them raising back from the dead. And so in that season, I was like, okay, Lord, when the third one died, I was like, I need a new revelation on death. Like, tell me something, because I'm struggling and I'm frustrated over facing so much right now, back to back. And in that season, I don't know if I could do this effectively. I'll try and just do it sitting down. So Jesus, he said, this is all that death is. And so he was facing one direction. He says, your consciousness is here in the physical realm. He says, and this is death, where your consciousness is now in the spiritual realm. And he's like, that's all that death is. It's this turning of awareness. And he says, and some people learn how to go back and forth. He says, that's what you're learning how to do. You're learning how to live in both at the same time. And so it brought a lot of peace to me, because it's like, okay, their consciousness, their aliveness has just shifted to being in the spiritual realm. And then some people can learn how to do both at the same time, which is what we call like the mystic community, where they're learning how to engage, be entangled with Jesus, and brush your teeth and do the dishes and do life here on earth at the same time.
Man, coping with loss and these kind of questions, like, it's interesting what you said. I would have never thought that someone would even insinuate that you, because you're moving on 30 days later, because you walked through your grief, that you didn't care or something. It's crazy what people could say or insinuate in different situations.
People try to justify their framework and their belief system. And so if to them, I was disrespecting and dishonoring the life of my son. Like, I didn't care. I didn't love him. It wasn't, I hadn't imprinted on him enough yet. And that's the only reason why I'm not carrying the weight and the pain, because obviously if I had gone through it like they did, and if I loved him more, then I would still be carrying him. So that's them trying to justify and understand, like, well, justifying where they're at, justifying their framework and their belief system. And so obviously I just didn't love my son as much as they did. You'll see that again and again. It's people aren't trying to be malicious. Even people trying to console me with the miscarriage. It's like, oh, I lost my cat too. I know how you feel. Or Jesus takes the best of them. Like, people say the craziest things, trying to justify their process and make sense of it all.
Yeah. And they're not always trying to be malicious, like you're saying, right?
No.
They're not trying to attack you or come at you. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember, again, I'm putting you on the spot here with some stories of healings, right? Some of the healings that you've seen, some of the crazy miracles that you've seen. Can we talk on them a little bit, just so we see the other side also,
Yeah. Um, I think it's just a matter of being entangled with Jesus. Like I don't go out and actively try and find miracles to do. I'm not going to the street and like being every sick person that I find or whatever. I'm living my life and with my kids, and they're my focus. And then when I feel the unctioning of the Lord, then it's like, oh, I'm noticing this about somebody, or being moved with compassion for somebody. There was a lady one time, I was flying and she was sitting next to me, and it was really funny because it was a racial thing at the beginning, because she was really unhappy to be sitting next to me. She wanted to be sitting with her friend in the back. So she was pushing really hard to try and get me to switch spots, but I didn't want to leave my husband. I wanted to sit next to my husband. So I told her, I was like, I'm so sorry. Like I'd rather stay. It's a long flight and I want to be with him. So she was not happy to be sitting next to me, but then she started getting violently ill. And apparently she had some acid reflux thing that was more than your acid reflux situation. And so she just started feeling super sick and she was throwing up on the airplane, and everything. And I just felt really bad for her because already flying is difficult. And so now to be throwing up while doing it, and it's so embarrassing and stuff. So I told her, I was like, hey, would you mind if I prayed for you? And she kind of looked at me like abruptly, because she'd already set the standard for there being like, I don't want to be near you. I'd rather be with my friend. Like, no offense to your skin color. I just, she kept bringing up skin color.
Wow.
And so I was like, for me to be then kind, she just kind of looked at me like, yeah, I feel horrible. Would you please pray for me? And so I laid my hands and I prayed for her. And the Lord showed me not just the throwing up thing, but he showed me like a shoulder and a knee and her head. And I started blessing her and praying over her soul and for her night terrors to go, and just moving with words of knowledge. And so first you could see just this wave of peace come over her to where she just felt totally better. And then she started feeling like the Holy Spirit, and she started crying and shaking and stuff. And she was like, how do you know all this about me? Like, what did you just do to me? She's like, I feel amazing. What is this? And so I spent the good chunk of the 4-hour flight then sharing the gospel with her and talking to her, because she'd been raised in religion, and she was like, God's not in the church. And I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, I'm not talking about the institution. I'm talking about Jesus right now. And I actually happened to have my first book in my bag with me. And so I was like, I gave that to her, and I was able to talk to her about, because the first book really contrasts between religion and the gospel that's in Ephesians and in Galatians and in the New Testament that we find. And so I gave that to her and was able to just talk with her and encourage her the rest of the flight. And so she went from judging me to apologizing and being like, I'm so sorry that I judged you for your skin color. And I had no idea. And I've never met someone like you before. And I want what you have. And she even talked about moving from Vancouver to South Carolina so that she could come and be close and develop what she saw in me. Like, she wanted to go after it. She didn't wind up actually moving, but it was something that she had talked about.
Wow.
So that's the kind of thing where it's like it's just doing life. Another time it was really fun. My husband and I were hiking in Redding, and there was a guy who was just all gothed out, all black, like God is dead, something like that on his shirt. He had all of these witchcraft, demonic tattoos on him and stuff. He was all giving off all the signs of, I don't want God.
Yeah.
And we crossed him when we were hiking. And as soon as I walked past him, I knew that he had night terrors and insomnia. And I was like, okay. But I really wanted to go see this spot on the hike. And so I told my husband, I was like, hey, if that guy that we just passed is still in the parking lot, I want to stop and talk to him, because I got a word for him. But I want to go see the spot on the hike first, and then we'll go back. And so it was funny, because that accountability thing, I had, we went out, saw the spot. We stayed for a few minutes, and then we hiked back, and he was still in the parking lot. And I was like, oh no, now I have to talk to him. And so it was really a funny conversation, because I was trying to figure out, like, I have to wait as long as I can to drop the name Jesus, because obviously he really, really does not like God.
Yeah.
And so it was a really funny dance, because I went up to him and I was like, hey man, I was like, when I walked by you, I had a feeling, and I was wondering if you deal with insomnia and night terrors. And he was like, no, I don't deal with insomnia and night terrors. And I was like, okay, fine, no problem. And I started to walk away, and he was like, wait, what's insomnia and night terrors? And I was like, you just said no. I was like, insomnia is when you can't sleep at night, and night terrors is when you have really bad dreams, not just like bad dreams, but really bad dreams. And he was like, oh yeah, I have both those. How did you know that? And he's like,
Wow.
well, are you a psychic or something? And I was like, something like that. And I said, I used to have that as well. And I've got something that I know that will help you if you're interested and stuff. And he's like, are you into like some white magic, like Wicca? What level are you? And he just starts rattling off all this stuff. And he was a talker. And so
Mm.
it was really hard to try and keep him on track because he would just say one thing and run with it. But he was like deep into the stuff. He had a human skeleton in his closet that he had bought from a Freemason
Wow.
dude. Like he was he was a dabbler, so he wasn't like fully in anything, but he was just like a dabbler in everything. It was just he was an interesting mixture of a guy.
Wow.
And so I kept bringing him back around. Yeah, but the reason why I'm talking to you right now is to see if you want to be free, like and stuff. And I had him. It was really funny because I had him on the hook. We've been talking for a while, and I told him my testimony, like without using Jesus. I was like, dude, I used to be tormented. I went through sexual abuse. I had night terrors and these insecurities, and my life sucked. And I was like hell every single night. And he's like, yeah, my life is just like that, and being like tormented at night. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you're not gonna like what I have to say. And he was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, do you want to know how I fixed it, how I dealt with it, what I did? And he was like, yeah. And so I finally had him on the edge of his seat. And I was like, his name is Jesus. And he goes, bleep, 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 bleep. And he like walked around me just screaming the F word. Fuck, that's fun, going off. And I was like, I match people with their intensity. So when
Mm.
someone's really quiet and reserved, I'll be really quiet and reserved and gentle with them. When someone's going to be really screaming in my face,
Mm.
not
Mm.
screaming in my face, but he was upset, then I will be loud and boisterous with you and match that energy level. And so I got right in his face and I was like, dude, I get it. Like the church sucks and they attack people and they're terrible and it's empty and it's hollow and where's the joy and where's the peace and all the rules. I was like, I get that. I was like, but Jesus isn't like that. And it was even the religious people that killed Jesus. Do you realize that? And I was like, he's the only answer. And I started prophesying over him. And I'm just like telling him, like, God sent me here today. I live 2 hours away from this place. God sent me
Yeah.
here at this moment, told me that you had insomnia and night terrors to get your attention, to let you know that he loves you, that he cares about you. Like it doesn't have anything to do with the church. Forget the church. And
Mm.
so I asked him, I was like, I really want to pray for you. Is that okay? And he was like, yes, but you can't touch me. Don't touch me. I was like,
Wow.
smart man. He knows. So I was like, I don't have to touch you. And so I prayed over him for the night terrors and the insomnia and everything to go. And I told him, and I started, again, I got more words of knowledge about family stuff. And I started praying into all that. And it just totally freaked him out because I'm reading his mail. And I told him, I looked him dead in the eyes and I said, tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel the best that you've felt in your entire life. You're going to sleep like a baby through the night. You're going to be at total peace. There's not going to be
Mm.
any night terrors. There's not going to be any insomnia. And then you are going to know that God has got your number, that he cares,
Mm.
that he sees you, and that he loves you. I know you're not ready to accept that right now, but tomorrow, recognize what he does tonight. And so he just like shell shocked, looked terrified, and just like, okay, I need to go now. I was like, okay, you could go. And so never saw him again, didn't exchange numbers or anything. I have no idea what he's up to today. So don't know how that story actually ended, but it was a really wild encounter with a quite quirky guy.
Yeah. Wow. Easy. Man, that's trippy. That was a cool story. Did you ever worry about how people are going to respond to you? Like, you sound so confident to just go up to people and stuff. Did you ever worry about that?
I did early on, but after I dealt with the spirit of like the lies of rejection that I dealt with,
Mm.
it wasn't something that I was afraid of anymore because as a teenager, when I had gone through a lot of rejection, and so that was like it hurt me and I was scared of what people thought and insecure and all of that. But after uh dealing with the lies and really going in after what Jesus says and what he believes and how he walked on the earth, it really shifted that fear for me because Jesus was perfect and Jesus was hated on the earth. Jesus did everything beautiful and in love and in excellence, and he was hated for it and persecuted and slandered for it. So
Mm.
the fear of being rejected and hated and attacked by people, even by the institution, really went away from me because it's like the religious leaders missed it. And everybody missed it. And so I'm not worried about what people think. If they're not ready yet, then they're not ready yet. And that's okay. My job is just to be live and be light. And those who are hungry and who are ready are going to reciprocate and who are going to be open. And those who aren't, like, their time will come later. And I just was planting a seed for down the road. Something that I saw on the comments asking about teaching it to kids. So kids don't get a junior Holy Spirit. They are just as much entangled with Jesus, one spirit with him. And so all it is teaching the kids that all you have to do is go to Jesus. He has all the answers. There's only solutions in heaven. There's no problems there. And so, Jesus, what do I do with this fear? Jesus, what do I do with this bad dream? Jesus, will you come and teach me about how to heal people? Or who am I? Or it's teaching kids to entangle themselves, and they don't have the years of baggage in history and lies that we as adults do. And so it's really easy for kids to get this and to run with it in the spirit. And so that's what we saw happen with the kids ministry. And that's what we see every day with our two daughters right now that are 6 and 8. And so they get to do amazing things with Jesus, even as children. And so at the kids ministry, I've seen the kids pray and heal cancer and limbs grow out and severe food allergies be healed and night terrors be gone and all sorts of amazing things. Let me get a drink and I'll tell a fun story about my daughter while we're waiting for Joseph to come back. So my oldest, I talked about us being at the exorcist church and there being witches and stuff that would still visit regularly. And so there was one, there's actually 3 of them that visited one Sunday morning. And I knew that they were witches. It was a witch and 2 warlocks. And we knew who they were. We'd been watching them and we're constantly telling them, inviting them into the kingdom. So we don't see them as a threat. We want them to get saved and healed and set free. And we've seen a lot of witches. Welcome back. I can't hear you though. If you did, just say something.
No, I didn't. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I got you.
I was preparing on how you were going to finish the podcast for me.
Yeah.
And I was going to type all the instructions here. This is part of the risk of going live, right? I have no idea what happened. This has not happened to me before like this. So yeah. I don't even know how I came back on, by the way.
Jesus.
Anyway, carry on your story. Yeah, go for it.
So the witches and warlocks, they're lost. They're pre-Christians. They're just lost. And so that we don't have enemies other than the enemy of, the demonic realm. And so there's no human enemies. And so when they come to the church, even if they have malicious intent, like, we want them to get healed and set free. And we've seen a lot of witches and warlocks get saved over the years. And so I went up to them and I was open with them and I was like, hey, I'm so glad that you're here. We hope that you're blessed by the service. And I just wanted to say hi and introduce myself. And so at that point, my daughter, she was in like the 7 to 9 month range. She's just on my hip, not walking yet. Chubby little baby, adorableness. And so that's all. I just said hi, went up for service. And then after service, I looked back and they're still there. So I went back and the female, the witch, she was like, your daughter sees so much. And I was like, yeah, I know that she can see in the spirit, because during worship, she's just looking at all the angels and watching all the stuff happen and stuff. And so I was like, yeah, she can see in the spirit and stuff. And she's like, that's amazing. And so while I'm talking to the witch and she's talking to my daughter, Kaya, about what she can see and what she can experience. So in a line of sight, I'm talking to her, and over behind her offset is her husband, and he crouches down onto the sanctuary floor and he puts his hand on the sanctuary floor, and I see these black pulses go through his hand and start hitting the floor. And so I'm like, okay, he's cursing the church. Like, I can see what he's doing in the spiritual realm. And so I'm like, Lord, like, okay, battle gear. Like, what am I doing? How are we going to stop this? Because I'm not okay with him just coming in and cursing the church. And so he's doing this, and the Lord told me, don't do anything. And I'm like, Okay, you're showing me what's happening in the spirit, and yet you don't want me to do anything. And thank the Lord I didn't. Thank the Lord I was actually obedient that time. Because my baby, she locked eyes onto him. And she was, you know how babies, they're easily distracted and everything. She was fixated on him. And the witch, she noticed what was happening. And so she started to try and distract her. And so she started waving her hands. She's like, baby, look over here. Kaya, look over here. And my daughter, she locked onto the warlock, didn't move her face. She just looked with her eyes, looked at the witch, and then looked right back at him. And she looks at me like, that was weird. And then she walks in the direct line of sight. So now Kaya is having to look through the witch to be locked onto her husband behind her. And she's still dancing, look at me, trying to distract her. And she would not, even with the direct line of sight, would not break her gaze off of what he was doing behind her. And she stood there for a couple more seconds trying to distract him or distract my baby. And then she turned around and she grabbed her husband. She said, we have to go. We have to go right now. And they got up and quickly ushered themselves out the door. And I'm just standing there with my baby. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what was that? That was super weird and stuff. And the Lord was like, thank you for listening to me and for not trying to intervene and do anything. And he said, what I was showing you was that Kaya was blocking his curses from hitting the sanctuary floor. So if they were actually taking root, they would have gone down and I would have seen roots take hit, like roots go down in. But what I saw is that they were just hitting the top of the sanctuary floor. They were being stopped. And he said, Kaya, being a lover of Jesus, even as a baby, she taught more about the gospel in that moment than you ever could have, because she is a baby. She has not done the fasting and the reading of the scripture and the growing and the fighting to become a big, powerful Christian. If I had tried to go head to head with them, it would have been powerful Christian versus powerful warlock. And it would have been a power struggle, and not a power struggle like Jesus wins, but to them, it would have been who's more powerful. Yes. But for a baby to be filled with the Spirit, there's no power. She hasn't done the fasting and she hasn't done the reading. She hasn't done anything. She's innocent. She doesn't know anything. She's pooping her diapers. Like, that did more preaching to them about the power of the gospel than anything I could have said or done. So thank the Lord that I shut up and I didn't do anything and I just let her preach the gospel to these guys. And then they scurried out.
That's amazing. The least in the kingdom.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very fun.
So someone brings up a good topic here. Like, it seems that there were human enemies in the Bible too. You know, we're taught that we don't war against flesh and blood. What are your thoughts on this? Because obviously there are some people who have made choices to go down certain paths, and they want power, they want prestige, they want fame. They do things willingly, right? So,
two things. Chuck Missler, I think is his name. Chuck Missler, yes. He did a great job mapping out. He was just brilliant, mapping out the Old Testament. And he went and looked at all of the tribes that the Lord said, kill every man, woman, child, animal, everything. And all of the tribes that Israel was commanded to wipe everything out, they were Nephilim tribes. And so they had that half demon, half human mixture, chimerid blood in them. And so that's why they had to be eradicated off the earth, because of they were these supernatural hybrid beings that were evil. And so God knew, and he knew that those bloodlines had to be wiped off the earth. And so the times that Israel was commanded to kill everybody, it was in those circumstances. Other kingdoms, it's like, okay, take over the land, take Israel back, push the other guys back out of your kingdom, but you don't have to slaughter everybody. There was a difference there, which brought a lot of peace to me, because I'm like, the children, oh, they were Nephilim children. Okay, like, that's different. So that being said, for the character of God for the Old Testament, nowadays, when God honors free will, and so he allows people to be evil and allows people to make terrible choices and to hurt other people and stuff. And so there's this wrestle of you've hardened your heart against the Lord and you've chosen to do evil on the earth. And so you are not my enemy, you're lost, and I'm going to pray for you. And at the same time, sometimes there's times to stop them. And so that's where David Hogan, do you know who David Hogan is? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So David Hogan, he tells so many stories of these guerrilla fighters, because he deals with the most intense things in Mexico.
Sure.
And so these guerrilla fighters, they're going through and they're slaughtering and raping and pillaging these villages and just horrific evils that they're doing. And so they'll go in and they're defending people. And so they are taking lives. They are, like willing to shoot the bad guy, shoot another human being. And so it's this, I think that it's both. It's this position of you are not my enemy and you're lost and you're hurting and you're blind. But if there's times where it's like I'm not going to allow you to keep doing this evil on the earth, and I'm going to stop you so that there's not more loss of life. And so I've had dreams before, again with these training dreams. So this hasn't actually happened. This is a dream, but I've had dreams. I am in real life. I am passionate about helping the sex trafficking victims and saving them, creating safe places for them, healing them, restoring them because they can be healed and whole in Jesus. So a lot of times that reflects in my dreams. And I've had dreams where we go in and we shoot up the bad guys. Okay. Save the kids, get the kids out. And then in the dream, I went back to the house where everyone was dead and I prayed over them and brought them back to life. And I said, here's the deal. You're doing evil on the earth. If you would like to know Jesus, I will let you live and I will disciple you and I will teach you about Jesus and teach you how to bring love and life on the earth. If you want to continue to bring death and be hardened against him and keep doing evil things, I will send you back and I will kill you again. And so I'm like, not trying to it's really intense, but it's like I'm absolutely going to kill somebody if it's to defend my child, if it's to defend, they are not a bad person. God did not create somebody to be evil. We choose to harden our hearts. And so if that person wants to soften their heart and change at any point, absolutely. But there is a line that's like, I'm not going to let you keep doing things. And that's, there's a really intense story from the Exorcist Church that I keep referencing. The head of the Satanic Church, his name at the time, he's dead now, was Anton LaVey. Yeah. And he's the father of the daughter that showed up at the doorstep. And so Anton LaVey, you can, this is weird stuff, but astral project. Yes. So he would take over his daughter's body and stuff. And he kept taunting the pastors and taunting the pastors and taunting the pastors and saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your whole family. I'm going to destroy your church. I'm going to kill my daughter for her betraying and becoming a traitor and all of this. And when it came to the big day was Halloween, one of the years, I don't remember which year, that it was like, she will die on the stone table. Like she's either going to come back and be a bride of Satan that she was bred to be, or she is going to be sacrificed. And those are your choices. And that's it. And so it had been a whole year of them trying to kidnap her and back. I mean, it's just crazy. You can't even imagine the stuff that has gone down. And Dave and Cheryl, that's the pastor's names, they have been praying and praying and praying for Anton's healing and for his heart to soften, for him to turn to the Lord. And they earnestly prayed and prayed and fasted for him as well. And he wouldn't, and he wouldn't, and he wouldn't. And then it came to that a point on October 31st where he was like, you guys, everyone's going to die. And Dave said, I'm going to cut your silver cord. Like, turn and repent now, or I'm going to cut your silver cord. And he did it. And so while he was astral projecting, so his soul was separated from his body, Dave cut his cord and Anton died instantly. And so there's that. It's a very intense subject, but there's that line of saying, like, being a defender and a protector of people, like, no one is evil. No one is too far gone. Everyone can have a change of heart and can come and have an incredible transformation. David Hogan tells powerful stories. One of the guys that had killed hundreds of his spiritual sons and daughters, beheading them, just horrible, horrible evils for 20 years. David Hogan was like, I hated that man. Like, he openly says, like, he was evil. He died. And David's like, finally, like, he got sick, he died. I don't have to worry about him anymore. And God told David to go and pray for him and bring him back from the dead. And David, I will not. Like, absolutely not. You know what he's done to these spiritual sons and daughters. Like, the heartache, and God just, he kept getting on him and getting on him, like, you will go and pray for him and bring him back from the dead. And so he did. And David, he drove the however many hours and he prayed for him, and he had a radical transformation in his life where he got saved and he turned over his entire guerrilla cartel wing for Jesus and just like transformed the entire region. And he's like a main part of his ministry and leadership, and he's over hundreds of churches, and like who this man became from the evil that he did is incredible. There's another story of that in India, a similar story with a pimp, that he was one of the main pimps in this red district in one of the states in India. And the missionary couple, they were part of Iris Ministries. They set up a meeting with him, and they instead of demonizing the pimp, like, you have thousands of girls that you are just using and abusing, and this is an evil industry. And instead of coming in and preaching condemnation, and instead of coming in and judging him and cursing him and all of these things, they came in and they loved him, and it broke him, and he got saved, and he turned all of his houses into restoration houses. And because of the influence that he had, it transformed so many of the other leaders as well that were other pimps in the area and stuff. And so if we can not demonize evil people because they're just lost, they're just hurting, there can be amazing and powerful transformations with these people. And sometimes they're going to stay hard-hearted up until the end. And in those cases, I've seen it. I haven't actually taken a life myself yet, but I would, for the sake to protect people. Like, there's that. I don't know. I should have said that live, probably. Like, oh well. Whatever.
Just how you said it, you know, it's like a, hey, I haven't taken the life yet, you know.
I know. I haven't raised the dead yet. Haven't killed one yet.
It's on the agenda, maybe 2026, you know.
Yeah.
But I was reminded of this story. Kids. Yeah, I'll just share this thing with you when you're talking about this, because it's interesting, right? Like, there's a couple of stories here of people I've podcasted and things that have happened in their life. And there was a guy who told me something offline where he was in a place where missionaries were getting killed. It was like a missionary cemetery there. And so he went there. The Lord sent him with his family. And he's like, how am I going to lead anyone here? If I mention Jesus, I'm getting killed. Mm-hmm. And so God gives them the strategy, and the strategy's working, and people are getting saved and baptized. It's amazing. And one day he gets invited to go do this training, and he's taking an intern with him, a local intern, and he's a foreigner, you know, a white man. And as he's going, he has this feeling like they might be tricking him. So he says to the intern, if something happens to me, don't do anything, just pray and leave me, you know. So he goes in this room, starts training, and one by one, there's about 15 guys there. They go and lock the 2 or 3 doors, you know, and close the windows. And they know it's on, and they start putting him on the ground, kicking him, beating him. Mm-hmm. And while he's getting smashed up, the other guy's crying because he doesn't know what to do, and he's praying. And then he sees a flash of light in the room, and everything stopped. And when he opened his eyes, they were all lying around him, all dead. Yeah. All dead. He's checking their pulses, all gone. And he's a white man in another country with dead locals. He's like, I'm done.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm done, you know? So he's like, God, what's going on? What do I do? And so he prays for them, and one by one they come back, and they get saved one by one, you know? Yeah. And so that is interesting, right? What you're saying. I think that understanding the heart behind what's really happening, but at the same time also understanding consequences are real. Like if you go and you shoot some people, but you had a troubled childhood, I can understand what you went through and it made you that guy, but there's consequences for what you're doing, you know? Yeah. So yeah,
it's just that concept of standing by, and when you have the power to stop someone from killing thousands of other people, hundreds of one life, like to stand by and to not, like, as a protector, as a good father, as a son on the earth, like, I'm going to stop evil from happening. And so it's this thing of like, I'm not demonizing you, but I'm also not going to I'm going to step in and not allow evil on the earth. And so there's this, I'm not trying to take away your free will. It's not operating from a spirit of control. And it's such a fine line, because control is witchcraft, you know, where the spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So there's that honoring the free will, but at the same time, there's consequences, and stepping in and not saying like, I'm just going to stand by and let you slaughter all these people. And so it's it's a very dicey and hard thing to try and stand, but I think it always comes down to that, again, that entanglement, walking with Jesus, because like my husband and I have an agreement. If something goes down and we're together, I get to go first. So he has the gun. He can finish it, but I get to go first because I have a theory that I can you know, command to start kicking out demons, because someone, when they go to that level, they're heavily demonically influenced. So I could just say, stop in Jesus' name, and start kicking out whatever demons I feel led to kick out, and just go after it on a spiritual thing. So I've had so many countless dreams of that happening, where someone comes to attack and I just start laying hands on them and praying over them, and they just, start manifesting and whatnot. And it turns into this powerful deliverance encounter where they had come to do evil, but then they came and encountered God. And so that it's that
So this makes you a weird mystic, you know that, right?
yes.
Like, because a lot of mystics kind of like, hey, it's just a construct, it's a mental construct. It's not
What's a
really a
construct?
demon, you know.
Oh,
But
okay.
you know what I'm saying? Like, what I mean is like deliverance. Like there are many that would say it's not even a real thing. Have you not encountered people that talk
No, but
about?
I was the church that I was raised in. It's
I
I have a
know. I
whole other
mean,
type of people that I'm friends with.
yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say is like me having podcasted people from all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right, but I would consider you a mystic, and would you consider yourself like, you know what I
Depends on
mean
how
by
you
mystic?
define it, but yes, lover of Jesus, and I do weird things. Absolutely.
I think by definition, a mystic is pretty much any believer would be a mystic, really, because you're believing in something you don't see, a higher power that you're engaging, and there is
Absolutely. Yeah.
high power in you, and you in yeah.
Yeah.
But just this open talk about like the demonic stuff, it's and I'm for it. I don't think like Jesus didn't cast out a mental construct into swine, as some people would say. It
Yep.
was a real spirits that went. I just think it's a fascinating conversation. This is really, really good. It's cool.
It's been very fun.
Well, I mean, I'm planning on still going a little bit. You got
Yeah.
some time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit on this before we go into the growth process, right? As a coach, I find that there is a massive reluctancy in the body of Christ to just grow up, to mature, because growing up requires responsibility,
Yep.
ownership, right? You can't stay ignorant and you can't stay a baby. So I want to go into that after this subject, but I want to hit this finance subject right now, right? Like with where we are at now in the world and people freaking out about financial collapse and COVID come in and all the drama that came with that,
Yeah.
and people having to find other ways of money and stuff like that. You were sharing you had a story to do with a decision you made and then getting in debt and something like that.
So in the move, up to us moving here, my husband and I, we have been supernaturally provided for down to the penny every single month. So some months it was really, really tight. One month we had 16 cents left over in our account, but all the bills were paid, and it was just month to month, like trusting the Lord and there being full provision. And that was in walking out of religion, starting to try and walk into sonship. But really, a big shift in my relationship and walk with the Lord was this move to come here, this stepping away, because that was the first thing that we had stepped out in that wasn't a command from the Lord. It was an invitation. So that invitation to co-reign and co-partner with him versus go here, do this, do this. So up to that point, we had been go here, do this the whole time with the Lord. And so in moving here, the financial provision stopped. And so there was this like for I want to quickly do the math, 10 years, 11 years, my husband had seen the Lord faithfully, month to month, again and again, show up, show up, show up, show up. And the moment we move here, we step out in sonship and that stops. And so we know
Wow.
God's still the provider. We know that he's still the protector. His nature has not changed. He's not mad. He's not withholding, like all those basic things, that you're going through of like, I'm still a son, all these things. And yet we're having to live off of credit cards and we're going into debt. And our businesses that we tried to start were failing. And we had 2 failed businesses. And then we started a third one that didn't fail, but we went into debt more and more every month. We just stuck with that business, but we went into debt more and more every single month. And so in that time, it's really flushing out these accusations of like, God, where are you? Why aren't you showing up? You're the protector, you're the provider, like wrestling out all of these things. And all of these people like that I look up to, and mystics and stuff, they're saying like, you create a platform for God to bless, and he's going to bless and he's going to provide, and it always works out. And we had seen that our entire lives until now. And so the Lord really fathered us in the debt, where I had demonized debt. Debt was God not providing. And so the Lord flipped that narrative on its head, and it was really crazy, like the transformation, all the stuff that it rooted out of our soul. But also like me saying, God, you're not showing up for us and we're going into debt. And he's like, have you gone without? It's like, no, like you still have a roof over your head. You still go on dates. You're still able to pay all of your bills, to go, to have food, and when we had our 10-year anniversary, like we decided we're going to go on a cruise. Like we haven't had a break and we're exhausted and we need this time together, and we need that, like it's 10 years. We need to rekindle this. So we decided to go on a cruise and put that on a credit card, because it's like, we need a break. And so we left my girls with my mom and stuff. And so he's like, you went on a cruise. Like, he's like, I provided for all of that. And he said, I am providing for you even in the debt. I'm taking care of you even in the debt. And so being raised in I don't know if you know who Dave Ramsey is. My dad. Yeah. So my dad was in this. My dad is torn between Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Dave Ramsey for my upbringing. It was kind of this weird mixture of financial input that I got. So, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you could have good debt, which our debt was not good debt.
Yeah.
So it was just bad debt. So, and that's how I had judged it, that it was bad debt and God wasn't showing up. And instead, he showed me that he can provide for us. It's all dust. The whole concept of finances, like it's dust and this is a vapor. And so whether I have red dust or I have black dust, for the red, going in the black or the red.
Understand.
But yeah, just clarifying.
That's a really good way to say it, by the way. Like this dust concept is a really good way to say it, because there are a lot of people who get, some type of dust too. Yeah, and that's their proof that they're right with God. Look at the dust.
Absolutely.
I love that concept. Yeah.
But it's all dust. And so the Lord used some dust to provide for us in seasons and other dust to provide for us in other seasons, but it's all his. Ultimately, as in sonship, like before in the Old Testament, it was 10% is the Lord's and then the rest is mine. But now I'm one spirit with him. I'm surrendered. I'm on the altar. It's 100% his. So everything in my life, the debt is his. The debt is his responsibility. The debt it's all his anyways. The house, everything that we are is his. And so learning how to flush out this judgment that I had made about debt, and this all these fear mindsets, and God's not showing up, and feeling orphaned, and like, but no, that's not true. I know he's still showing up, and I'm writing these books in this season, and all these powerful encounters that we're having in these seasons. Like, it was a big wrestle until finally it's like, okay, it's all just dust. And so we can have lots of dust, we can have little dust, we can be red dust or black dust, it doesn't matter. Like, the character of God stays the same, my identity stays the same. And that's, I don't remember exactly the question that you're asking.
Well, we were just going over that story pretty much. I don't know if you were able to touch on how big was the debt. Was this like big debt?
40,000. So I don't know if people would say, depends on who you ask, if that's a lot or not.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was 2 years. So each year we went about 20,000. And this last year was the first year. 2024 being last year, we didn't go into debt. So we were able to not pay off our debt, but we were able to make the payments on our debt and make ends meet every single month. And the crazy thing is, there was not an aha or anything that changed at the end of 2023. The heavens did not split open. There was not any change or encounter or visitation, any declaration that we made. It was just this perseverance of, no, God's got us. He's the provider. He's the protector. Everything that he has is his. Like, if this is how he wants to spend this much money, because you spend a lot of money on interest every single month because it's credit card debt. And so not anymore. We've now been able to switch it over, but it's like, God, you're wasting all of this dust on interest. Like, it's not going to anything. Yes. And so If this is how he wants to spend his money, then fine. Like I'm gonna go stay in a place of rest, and I'm not gonna let this rob me anymore. I haven't sinned. I haven't done anything wrong. It's been wholehearted and earnestly. Like we haven't been flamboyantly spending our money. We haven't done anything different than what we've done our entire lives. And so after those 2 years of flushing out and flushing out and flushing out, and then there was a shift, and we didn't. I think it's just that the perseverance shifted it, like the staying steadfast of this is who God is, this is his nature. And if he wants, like, I'm not afraid of the debt, I'm not afraid of the dust either way anymore. And like, when we have a financial crisis arise, it's like, it's going to work out. Like I'm not losing sleep over it anymore because I've seen God again and again show up. And I don't care how it shows up, whether it's the debt or the not, like he shows up and he provides every single time. And so the shift there wasn't anything that brought about the shift. There was just all of a sudden last year, we were able to make enough money and things shifted and make ends meet every single month. And this year we're going to keep pushing in business and start another business and just see what God does.
Come on. This is good.
Fathering in debt.
Yeah, because I think that people don't realize where there's debt, just like say past abuse or something, there's shame and guilt attached to it, and people keep that shame and keep the guilt and keep the I made this mistake, and they don't let that go, right? And so they hold on to the debt without realizing it in an unhealthy way. So you wrote this the first book that you wrote is on kind of coming out of churchianity, institutionalized mindset into freedom, getting out of Egypt, and coming into promised land. But then when you get out of Egypt, you need Egypt to get out of you. Is that still in the first book, or is that the second book where Egypt is getting out of you?
A little bit of both. So it points the direction that, hey, like you've got all this soul stuff that's keeping you from being a powerful son on the earth. And so that's what the next 2 books is about. The second book is really how to be a powerful son on the earth with boundaries and communication and relationships, and like it's the Cocoa gospel goes into that, a lot of it, surrender and stuff. So that shows how to be a powerful son on the earth, but you can't get there without book 3, which is the inner healing one. So that's the one that just goes after all the stuff. And then the stuff, I think I cover 9 like the most common lies, themes of lies that I've encountered in my interactions with doing inner healing and encounters with people. And then I teach at the end of the book, like any other thing, you can just plug it into this and go on an encounter, ask Jesus about it. And then the 4th book, once you get the soul stuff out of the way, then you get to start moving effectively in power and authority. Because until you deal with the soul stuff, that soul stuff is a stumbling block to you that whole time that you're trying to walk in power and authority, because you're tripping over these lies, you're empowering this darkness in your life, and it's holding you back from being able to just be the light and love and walk in power that we're created to be.
Yeah. So what, in your opinion, right, in your thoughts, why are a lot of people, the majority I would say, not so keen on growing up and maturing and taking ownership, responsibility, submitting to a process,
Comfort. We are comfort-minded people. We're pain-avoidant people. And to grow is to be uncomfortable. And so people would rather stay comfortable. And so it's actually very rare to find people that want to actually grow and put the hard work in and do the thing to grow and mature. And so that's time and time again. It's not lack of information or anything like that. Same thing with like working out. Why do so few people work out and want to be healthy? Because it's work and it's uncomfortable and it's not fun to eat the healthy food instead of eating the junk food and stuff. And so that personality is the exact same when it comes to the character. Like it's hard work to face your offenses, to face your judgment, to let go of your unforgiveness. Like who wants to go through that? And so for me, I think I got a taste of it because I was so tormented, and then freedom tasted so good. Like it was so good to be at peace, and I didn't have peace. And so that's what really sparked my hunger for this. But so many people, they're not in enough pain to push them to want to get out of pain. So it's just manageable enough. It's just uncomfortable enough that they can just keep doing their life how they're doing it and not mature, not grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like I mentioned with the coaching that I do, this is something I see often, and a lot of times I see people who are kind of numb to the pain. They numb the pain with all kinds of habits and ignore the pain. It's there. And part of my job, which part of my calling, I believe, which I don't like, or I'm fully coming to terms with still, is just to show people this thing, of like, um, here it is. Here's your pain. You're acting like it's not there, and it's hurting you every day.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, right? Because there are people who almost think, well, I'm a son of God and now I'm there. But this
Right.
maturing process is almost ignored, I don't know
Well,
if there's
it's that
anything you want to
wrestle
say on that.
between like, well, yeah, because you're a son of God, so you're there. You're seated in heavenly places. It's done. So that is true, and that's the thing is you got to remember that you're a three-part being. So it is true. You're a new creation. It's done. It's finished. You're seated in heavenly places. At the same time, the Bible says when you renew your mind, you're going to transform your life and to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Like you are born again as a baby. Babies don't know how to roll over. They don't know how to do anything for themselves. And so you're starting over as a baby, pooping yourself, making messes everywhere you go, spilling the milk, needing to learn to grow. Like in order to mature, you have to go through that uncomfortable processes and go through the hard stuff. And so I hear that too, where it's people saying, I'm already there. It's already done. It's like, you can't cut out process. Like the instant gratification, like as fun as that is, it doesn't work in the physical realm. Like you can't just, I want to be fit now. Like you have to put the work in to get fit. And the same thing goes for the soul.
And so this would be a good place for us to bring rest in the equation, right? Because people are
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I'm in rest, so I don't work, but the Bible tells you to be diligent to enter into rest, strive to enter into
Yep.
rest. This might be a good time to bring that up, right? Like, how do you strive to enter into rest?
Well, funny thing about rest, Noah, the name Noah means rest. So
Yep.
Noah had the biggest job of any human ever, I believe, still to this day, because no one has ever worked on a project for 120 years since then, I believe, because we don't live that long anymore. So Noah worked on the ark for over 100 years, 120 years, I think is what it was. And his name meant rest. So the man who was named Rest literally had the biggest project of human history ever still to this day.
Amazing.
But he did it in rest. And so rest doesn't mean that you're not doing anything, but it is the state in which you are living. And so it's that position of the heart. It's not a physical state of being. It's a soul state of being is what I want to say.
So it's not what I'm doing, it's where I'm doing it from.
Yeah. Yeah. Great verbiage.
That is fascinating, right? Because I've seen a lot of people use that as a reason to not do much or pursue things and not have diligence or excellence. And
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Yeah, you have rest justifying the other, and then you have religion saying you have to kill yourself 24/7, 7 days a week, not take any holidays off to heal the sick and raise the dead and preach the gospel and burn yourself out. So you've got the pendulum swings on either side, and so it's coming to that place of that surrendered and oneness and operating from rest, and which to me is really operating from the tree of life, where you're free from the law, you're free from the should and need and have to, because you've been given the Spirit, and so you're one with him, one with Jesus. As he is, so am I on the earth. And so you're at rest, you're at peace. And so everything that you do on the earth, there's only solutions in heaven. And so everything that you're facing has a solution. And so you might work hard to release that solution on the earth, but you're doing it from a place of it being finished. You're doing it from a place of victory. And so everything that you do is from, it's done, it's finished. And I'm just now releasing the already finished work on the earth. It'd be kind of like a quick way to try and say the operating from rest. I'm not striving and fighting to make something happen. Like I'm not having to put my own work in. He is my strength. He's the one making it happen. I'm yielded and submitted to him. And so now I'm just being this open vessel and partnering with him in this love dance on the earth, doing things, but it's from a place of victory and from a place of being done.
So good. So good. Maybe the last thing I'd like to touch on is the subject of suffering. Well, something interesting happened for me. So I was saying to Jessica before this podcast, my journey just a couple of days ago, I decided to do a marathon for fun and make it harder for fun. And then it became really hard and it wasn't fun. I was in pain. And I ended up like, so I had an 8-hour journey planned. It turned into 12. I had three hours of discomfort. It turned into 5 hours of pain. And I had headphones and things I would listen to planned, and I left my headphones at home and I couldn't get them. And so it became 8 hours, 12 hours engaging with the Lord on and off. And in the pain, it was really hard to just engage him from a peaceful place. Like, that was a really interesting, where it got really painful for me. It was like my natural response at that time was not wanting to engage with him, like, and just be able to hear him clearly. And he started speaking to me about the portal of suffering. And I'd never thought of suffering as a portal, and he was showing me how there's so many different ways where we engage realms through obedience and love and joy, and all these things open up a realm for you, but so does suffering, and it's the one thing that we all kind of don't want.
Right.
The
comfort mindset.
Yeah. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know, you've talked about in the midst of suffering, walking things out. Yeah.
There's just such a beauty that you get to tap into with the Lord that you can't tap into in any other place. That place of brokenness, that place of desperation. And it begets such beautiful things in your life. So we were born into this world that's broken. And it's amazing because that wasn't the intention. God, the garden was perfect. The garden was beautiful. There wasn't going to be any sin and death and sickness on the earth. That was the original design. We broke it. We brought the curse of sin, and now there's just evil and brokenness and suffering in the earth. But God, in his goodness, he promises to bring good from everything. He promises to never leave us or forsake us. And so in the midst of something that's so horrific, and because the suffering is a scale, in the midst of there being such brokenness on the earth and such evil and such pain that we do experience, that cup of joy is so intimately tied with the cup of suffering. And so God encountering his people when they're hurting the most is the most radical and beautiful and offensive thing. Heidi Baker has an incredible interview with Randy Clark where she talks about persecution. And in that, she talks about how offended she was because one of her spiritual sons, he had just watched his family be raped and beheaded in front of him, and he had just escaped. And he had traveled all through the night to get to her hut, and he's just weeping and wailing because of the pain and the horrors that he just experienced. And the Holy Spirit came and flooded her not tent, but the thing that the house that they were at. And as the Holy Spirit just overwhelmed this boy, he started laughing and giggling and weeping tears of joy. And Heidi Baker was so offended. She's like, God, like, how could you encounter him like this? He just watched the most horrific things I've ever heard. And now you're encountering him with joy. Like, now he's radically rolling back on the floor. Like, can't contain himself, ecstatic, the Shekinah glory wrecking him. And she was like, I was offended at first. And then I decided, like, who am I to be offended at God? Like, he knows best. And so just embracing the cup of joy in the midst of the suffering and the tender sweetness that the Lord had in that moment. And that's an extreme example of it, but I've seen again and again, like, there is so much beauty and so much power that comes from suffering. It was not the Lord's plan, but his ability to bring good from it and to bring transformation from it. He's like, I'm sorry that you're going through this, and that's what this earth is, but I'm so good in the midst of this immense pain that you're going through. And I'm going to bring so much good, and the ripple effects, like, the enemy is going to regret ever having done this to you in the midst of that suffering. And so there's just, if we can push past the offense that we have at God of, like, how could you let this happen? If we can push past the finger pointing and go and engage the Lord in those moments, you can there's such a sweetness and such a beauty. And like, the first time that I really feel like I can say that I touched that was with the suffering I went through during the miscarriage, because with the miscarriage, it's a death within you. Like, I was holding my son and then he died inside me. Like, I don't know how to, the suffering was so real and so painful, and the sweetness of the Lord that encountered me in that moment, and the deep healing and the profoundness that he touched my soul in that moment. It's incredible. It's beyond words and beyond what I can explain, but there's just this, I want to the church is, I'll say this gently, the church has not been set up to handle suffering well. The church has not been prepared to handle suffering. And so when people go through hard times and suffering, especially, they're dismayed and they lose faith. And that breaks my heart. And so I really want to help people be empowered to stand firm and to lean into the Lord in the midst of great pain, so that they're not swept away and so that they're not dismayed, but so that they can lean in and they can taste the sweetness and they can see the joy and see the strength and see who God is in the midst of your pain and see how good he is in the midst of your pain. Something that's really offensive is like the amount of healing that I went through with my sexual abuse. So when you look back at the memories, I kept going through healing. I kept bringing it to him, the memories and stuff. And I had got to the point of neutral with it. So there was no more bitterness and hurt and unforgiveness and shame or fear or anything. Okay. I'm back to neutral when I look at the memory. And I felt the Lord like prick at my heart, say, keep bringing it to me. And I was like, but I'm at neutral. That's what they say to do. Like once you're at neutral, then you're done. The healing is done. And he said, keep bringing it to me. And so I kept bringing it to him. And now the transformation that he did, because he's so good, he doesn't just bring things to neutral. He brings goodness. He brings the joy. He brings this incredible radical transformation. When I look back at the memories of what happened to me when I was a child, all I see is Jesus and all I feel is him. How offensive is that?
Yeah. Wow.
Like looking back at those memories of abuse, and I get wrecked by the goodness of God. I am overwhelmed by his power. Every time I go back and I look at what should be a horrific memory, I am undone by God. And so that's the power of what he can do. He can rewrite the memories. He can meet you. So like with those, I didn't know how to engage God. I didn't know how to interact with God. I was just a little girl being terrorized in that moment. So you have from the miscarriage, me learning how to encounter God in the moment of suffering, and then the bigness of God with my suffering when I was a child, being able to go back and rewrite the memories and tell a different story of power and beauty and transformation, and how many lives have been changed now because I went through that. Like he did not cause that to go through. That was not his desire. He didn't want me to go through that so that I could help other people. No, all of that's garbage theology. We live in a broken world. And we're guaranteed persecution. We're guaranteed hard times. And in the midst of it, he is good and he is big and he brings beautiful, powerful transformation from what we go through.
That is so good. And I love that. Like he doesn't just bring us from bad to not bad. He takes us into fully good.
Yeah.
And even with salvation, we see that a lot. You know, people get saved. So we come out of the darkness into the light, and then people kind of just camp there, you know, like at the door. And it's like, no, there's this whole kingdom we get to walk into and grow into. And we don't just go from debt to zero bank balance, but we're now increasing it in a sense, you know? So I love it, man. And obviously I gave a very tame example in terms of a walk compared to what you're saying. A couple of times where for me that I was forcefully put in that place would be when my mom passed. That was a really hard time. And when I went through a lot of church drama, you know, so I know what you're saying in terms of the beauty in that, and it's not easy to choose to stay there and walk through. But yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing your story and being real and raw. You know, I think it's really, really awesome.
Happy to share. I just want to help people crush it. So anytime that there's an opportunity to share, I'm like, let's do it.
Boom. So these books, I mean, maybe you can touch a little bit on anything you want to say on your books, and then we can lead people to your website. And
I don't know. If you want to grow and mature as a son on the earth, they are helpful tools that will help you do that. And so they're a tool. They'll be helpful, but you don't have to. You can go talk to Jesus, because that's how I did it, because I didn't have the books and stuff. I just had Jesus, and that's important to me, is that people know that Jesus is enough. Like he is enough. He's enough. And so I didn't have the coaches and the spiritual fathers and or even like get to go to the supernatural schools or get to go to the trainings, like just the way that my life has happened in its journey. It's just been me and Jesus again and again and again. And so he's taught me so much. And so if you don't have access to tools, like Jesus is enough. And if you have access to tools, they will help the journey and make the journey faster. So tools are very helpful, but so the books will help, but they also, all you need is Jesus.
Boom. That's the most honest promotion you will ever hear from a person. Yeah, I think you and I are twins. And so there you go, guys. The link is actually in the caption. And for some of you, you might feel in your heart like you to grab these books, like 1 or 2 or 3. Part 1, part 2, part 3. I think there's 4, right? 4 books there.
Yeah.
But I think this is just the beginning, Jessica. Maybe we're going to have a few conversations this year on different subjects, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, this has been super fun.
Boom. All right, guys. Well, that's us. It's been like over 2 hours of goodness. So I'm sure some people are going to rewatch this. So that's how you can connect with her. I've put Jessica's website in the caption. Click on there, check everything out. All her social media is on there. Resources are on there. You can connect with her, or you can leave comments on here for her that she can read. Kerry says, "Thank you so much. I wept through so much, but so grateful." There you go.
That's awesome.
But boom. Awesome, guys. Well, bless you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And we're going to sign off, and I'll see you on the next one.
Sounds good. Have a great one.
So, Jessica, you stay with me. Everyone else, goodbye.
Yep.